No, it isn't. I think they keep on. But she wasn't able to work billets, so I think the ending with that.
Since there are people that it's like more conversations. Sometimes there's not. It's except for
Meeting of the County Board of Election Administration has recommenced. We're going to go back to public comments for the agenda items only. Is there anyone that has any public comments for agenda items only? Seeing none. We'll go to the financial report. Election Supervisor, the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you. You have July and August financials in front of you, since we didn't meet last month. So just to kind of go over a quick recap, our biggest expense, our fiscal year started over July 1. So our biggest expense to date has obviously just been salaries, but other things that were included that you'll see on there, $1,500 was paid to Easy Vote. That's an annual contract that we have with them we do numerous things with applications for absentee ballots as well as check in on early voting. We provided Dennis with a cell phone and fuel and postage. You will see expenses for that as well. We're about just over 7.5% of our budget used up through the end of August. And there weren't any other things on there that were weird. Unless you all have any questions, let me know.
Anyone have any questions about the budget? All right, moving on to unfinished business. First item is the Favorito lawsuit. We did receive an email from the county attorney today, saying it's still pending. A referral has been made to the administrative law judges panel for assignment, and there's no court date because not everyone has been served as of yet. And with that said, I move to postpone Favorito lawsuit until required actions of the election superintendent or the lawsuit is disposed of. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. Item is postponed until further notice. All right, discussion concerning after action report. So in our strategic plan, 3-3-1, at the beginning of each election cycle, we are to decide what processes we as a board would like to pursue as far as an after action report and to focus on during the election cycle. We're here today to determine what processes we would like to focus on for an after action report. With that, I open up the floor. And we say that it has to be done prior to the voter registration, normally, which is October the 11th.
Sorry, can we ask the supervisor for areas perhaps that you noticed with the last election that needed improvement?
Sure. I think one of the things that I've been working on is the collection of the compact flashcards and ballots at the end of the night. I think we can streamline that a little bit better with board members' assistants as well as staff people. If we, like we had done previously in the past, we created 2 sets of teams. 3 teams, I think we had, or 2 teams of 2 people that were able to had set destinations and they went around and picked up. I think that's something we need to reconsider so that we will receive our votes quicker. And that was the main thing. I did not write down, I had one other thing, but I did not write that down. I apologize. But yeah, absolutely. I'd be glad to provide some more feedback from the last election if you'd like. I can put that in writing. Okay.
If you could provide that to the board, would appreciate that. I know it says that there was supposed to be a vote on this. I don't believe it. We need to take a vote on it. We know what we want to collect now, so we'll just move on. All right.
Okay.
And item 3, security at polling places for upcoming elections. I know that, two of the board members met with the sheriff along with the election supervisor. I don't know the outcome of that meeting. I know that there was some, discussion on what the plan was with the sheriff. If you could fill us in a little bit. Election supervisor?
Sure, we spoke with Sheriff Proctor, excuse me, and Captain Cedric Brown. Captain Brown is the gentleman that's over patrol. So he's the one I provide information to on the location of our polling places. So we had a nice conversation, I believe, with Captain Brown, Sheriff Proctor, Dr. Bradford was in attendance, as well as Board Member Michaels. Visited. He took a good chunk of time with us, a little over an hour. And we just talked about the importance of, I guess, concerns maybe that not just board members have, but the public has in going to voting precincts on election day and for early voting. And I think it ended with they were going to discuss a few more things amongst some of the patrol members. Maybe review some of the sites where we actually do early voting with us, like do walkthroughs with us. And then one of their deputies was also going to get with me about some training for our poll managers and co-managers on some tips for how to react in emergency situations. So I am actively working with them and went over to see Captain Brown today, but he wasn't available. I left him some information, so hope to have more information at our next meeting.
Okay. Do board members have any questions?
Yeah. And you discussed physical presence at each polling place?
We discussed that as a possibility. We discussed how other counties proceed with their security at the polling places, whether they have any uniformed officers at all or people in general there. Maybe they have detail, like retired security that they might bring it. We talked about just different scenarios and options. I think, as even there were some differing opinions on that as well, but I think what we're trying to do is do what's best for our voters and our poll workers. So we're trying to come to some kind of consensus on that. And I think when I have more information from the sheriff, I'll be able to share it with all 5 of you. And then I'm sure Dr. Bradford has some insight from her meeting that she might want to share as well.
I don't know if I have insight, but one of the things that we talked about is the fact that we've got 12 polling places, and on any given shift, we don't have 12 deputies on duty. So, there's, it's a good idea. Well, there are pros and cons, but the number, it's just not physically possible. And the sheriff recognizes that he is the one who is responsible. He is the law enforcement officer responsible for the security of elections. And he was fully aware of that. And so we did ask him to reach out to the other municipalities, to Kingsland and to St. Mary's, and maybe they can work out something among the 3 of them. But it really boils down to funding, as do most things. They boil down to how much money you got. And we didn't bring any money to the table. We didn't have any money to bring to the table. So it depends on the Board of Commissioners. And if there's going to be that level of support, someone has to pay for that. And of course, it wasn't in our budget request. We can request it, some additional security, I guess, for next year, and certainly probably for 24. But I think that the bottom line is, A, there just aren't enough deputies, and B, there's no funding, because somebody's got to pay. If they're going to work, they need to be paid. So
My question is, all right, so we would have to draw from the county, Kingsland and St. Mary's for serves. Am I correct?
Well, it's the sheriff's responsibility.
Yeah, but it comes from the three,
Well,
no?
no, it's the
No.
sheriff's responsibility.
Right.
So anything, I don't think he can mandate to to Kingsland and St. Mary's, but I think they all have a good working relationship. So it's
Right.
counting on that, yeah.
And I know, and the financial thing is always a problem,
Mhm.
but we need them for one day. And I think in today's environment, my input only, I think with what's going on in today's environment, I think we need a physical presence.
We talked about that.
Huh?
We
I'm
did
thinking-
talk about that, and,
did.
and Sheriff Proctor pointed out that some of the sheriff's organizations, for example, the oh goodness, the NSA, the National Sheriff's Association, they've done research, and so I know it just depends on one's point of view, but for every person who wants a visible presence, you can find another person who does not want a visible presence. And so certainly, the law enforcement community is sensitive, and they've researched that among themselves, and they find, well, the research that he was talking about, of course, you could probably go someplace else and find another piece
Exactly.
that will say just the opposite.
Right. So I
But
think it's up to us whether we want to insist on it or not, or push for this or whatever. But
I think the big
we,
takeaway was the sheriff understands it's his responsibility
Yeah.
to provide security at the polling locations, and I'm sure that he has that threat assessments that we're not privy to and other information, and he should know how to secure the polling places.
And Ms. Hahn, I think I'll have more information from Sheriff Proctor once I find out how his meetings went with the 2 municipalities. So then I'll be able to share more about how we can move forward for November the 8th. I think overall, it's not like we weren't concerned about early voting, but that we were considering a potential deputy or possible deputy to be there on the day of election day, not
Yeah.
for 3 weeks of advance voting.
right.
That other methods would be used throughout that course of time. So we have a little bit of time, and I'm just waiting to get his information. So as soon as I find out what his thoughts are and if he's worked anything out with the municipalities or has some ideas, I'll share that with you all.
So this item will stay on the agenda
All right.
in October. Everyone satisfied? All right, moving on to new business discussion concerning the clerk of Superior Court designating the elections supervisor as the records retention custodian, all future election materials.
All right, Chairman, if I can, I'd like to introduce our clerk of court, Joylyn Turner. In your binder, you have a letter that Joylyn drafted up, and she's going to give us a few minutes of her time to tell us a little bit more about what this means.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
thank you.
I thought you looked familiar. Thank you.
Mhm.
Again, my name is Joylyn Turner. I'm your serving clerk of Superior Court, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity to address you about voting materials and the fact that up until this point in time, the clerk of Superior Court has been the designated record holder of election materials. After doing some research throughout the state, it is common for the clerk of Superior Court to designate someone else as the keeper of the records. Now, that purpose being because you can imagine the volume of records we currently hold in Superior Court. And recently, when Ms. Nettles had the task of going in and pulling information from a previous election, I had to accompany her It all had to go through the proper channels. I had to be sure that they were opened correctly, resealed correctly, those types of things. It's not that I don't want to devote the time to it, but she has to go through me as the gatekeeper to be able to perform her duties. And so what I'm proposing is, if I've given you a copy of OCGA 21-500, and it says that immediately upon completing the returns required by this article, in the case of elections other than municipal elections, the superintendent shall deliver in sealed containers to the clerk of Superior Court, or if designated by the clerk of Superior Court, to the county records manager or other office or officer under the jurisdiction of a county governing authority which maintains or is responsible for records. Now, if there is a code section that relates to elected officials or who those folks are, and that code section is 50-18-99. So a county official is referred to in item number 2 as a office or officer, means any county office or officer of any office under the jurisdiction of the governing body which maintains or is responsible for records. So she certainly qualifies as the keeper of the records. I can tell you that we're currently in a first-time process of purging records from Superior Court. Now, in order for an election record to qualify for purging, it has to be held for 24 months. So there's a list of, I believe I gave Shannon the list too, and I can't find, oh, there it is. I have a list of 5 that have been identified for destruction. But before that can happen, I have to carry it to the grand jury. So what I physically do is bring those materials with me to the grand jury, along with a proposed order. I give them the law designating the destruction of those documents. Now, with the destruction of documents, there's always a caveat. And in Superior Court, the caveat is unless they are deemed historically significant. Now, I'm going to not know what election record is historically significant. Ms. Nettles or any future election supervisor, that's why my proposed order reads election supervisor, not a specified name, as the record keeper. They have a better understanding of the election process. They have a better understanding of what takes place in polling places. They have a better understanding of the environment, although I'm keenly aware as well. But it would be prudent for the election supervisor to be able to make the determination of how to handle those records. They're not without oversight either, because there is specific oversight regarding election records. When they're delivered to me, they're sealed. If they are done, they're going to be sealed the same way if the election supervisor holds those records. And then, although I've identified these for destruction, if the grand jury gives me permission to actually order the destruction of these records, I have to prepare an order, present it to a Superior Court judge, and he has to give me an order for destruction. Same process would take place with an election supervisor. So it is my opinion, and it makes perfect sense to me that the election supervisor should be the holder of election records. So under the statute, my proposal is that I create an order, have it signed, and actually designate the current election supervisor as the holder of those records. Any questions?
Does then the supervisor go to the grand jury with the records? Does that, or does she go to you then?
She would probably gather the records, would accompany her to the grand jury. It's not a very formal meeting, but I would accompany her to the grand jury simply for the purpose of indicating she is now designated as the record holder. And therefore, she has the authority to come before them. So I would present a copy of the order that would stay on file in my office to the grand jury and say, pursuant to this order, she is now the record keeper. You will no longer have to go through me in order to order the destruction of these records. I'm actually going to the grand jury this month.
Are you comfortable with that?
I think it's a good idea.
I do too, but I want to know if you're comfortable.
I am.
All right. You want backup on that, or would you prefer to
We're
have
gonna
backup
vote
on
on
that?
it. We're going to vote on it, whether.
No, I meant, would you like to have that isolated in your, or would you like to have say an assistant, or so that there are two of you doing
Well,
that?
I think it would be two members of staff, myself and another staff member that would work on the records retention, and then the county has a records retention facility that we'd utilize, so it wouldn't take up any more space in our space,
Okay,
and it would still go to the same building, just a different part of the building if we did it.
So how often do you have to interface with the election supervisor for election records?
Every time there's an election.
So once a year?
Yes, sir. Or if there's others, there's often municipal elections that take place and those have to come as well, and we have to hold those records.
So maybe 5 times a year
Yeah, maybe,
at
yes,
the
sir.
most?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If any records are lost when they're in your custodian, that's your
My
responsibility?
responsibility, yes, sir.
Right, so
They're sealed. You have to
they
understand.
are sealed, I agree.
They come to me sealed. I don't have any authority to open them and question the election supervisor about the contents.
Correct. I just harken back to the state election board just had a meeting, and there was 2 ladies that had to come before the state election board because there was election material found from 2014 and 2015 in some bathroom at their courthouse
Well,
that should have been turned over to the
that's what I'm
Superior
asking.
Court. But they were the custodians of those records.
right. I will tell you that of the 5 that I'm preparing to take to the grand jury, 1 does date back to 2014. Now, that's simply because when you commingle records, in other words, if you were to go into, like, when Shannon had to go with me into our records retention facility, we had to physically go in, find the boxes, pull them out, do all of that kind of stuff in order for her to satisfy the requirements of the Secretary of State. Now, those records remain commingled. In the transfer of documents from the old courthouse, which has been several years ago, to the new facility, you can only imagine these were just stacked in different places. And these are 5 I have found one dating back to 2014. I have a complete list of the 5 that I'm going to present to the grand jury
Okay.
for authorization to destroy.
Right.
But these things get commingled and you find you're going down one aisle of the records retention, you're like, what is that? Oh, that's election records. You see what I'm saying? Where
I do.
if the records maintained by the supervisor of elections, they're not commingled with anything else.
Gotcha.
They're readily identifiable, readily available.
So you don't have a designated area just for the elections?
No, sir. Unfortunately, when we moved, things, it's a mess. That's why I did get approval from the county commissioners and hired a records retention clerk. Records retention has never, when I say never, been addressed in Camden County. We have records dating back to the teens that are sitting in our records retention facility. Whether they are historically significant is unfortunately rest on me. There are certain items that I deem historically significant, just as the supervisor of elections, because of their knowledge and understanding of elections, would know what's historically significant and what's not. My focus is on Superior Court. Currently, I'm responsible for these records as well.
Right.
If we turn this over to our election supervisor, will you have a dedicated place to put these records?
I will work that out with our county clerk for where our records will be in the building, the records retention building.
But they won't be segregated from any other records?
No, so it's not a separate room that's under lock and key all by itself. It might be a wall, or this area of the floor is all elections.
All right.
Yeah, so it's not like, not completely. separate.
Access to that facility or where you're keeping the records, how many people have access to that?
I have access to the main door and to my door only. In other words, if you walk in that records retention facility, it looks like a long hallway with doors off to this side.
Okay.
So mine happens to be the first door that you come to. Beyond that, I know there's probate court, there's magistrate court, and I think then there's the county.
Okay.
So it's segmented, walls between, doors between, locked doors between.
Okay.
So I would not have a key to get into the records of the county, albeit that's where the supervisor of election would place her records. I wouldn't have the ability to get in and do anything.
So she'd have the only key.
Yes,
So you'd maintain responsibility for the records you have in there now?
yes, sir. That I would have to. By law, if the board so chooses to designate the supervisor of elections, again, not named, because otherwise you're gonna have to come back to the board every time it changes.
Right.
But authorizes the supervisor of election to be the holder or the keeper of those records, then they're theirs. I'm no longer in the picture at
Right.
all.
Right.
At all. In fact, they would prepare the order and probably call me and say, hey, you got a judge this week that could look at this order and sign it for me. But other than that, that would be my only role in it.
So the records retention for the county, how many people have access to that
Mhm.
portion?
Honestly, can't answer that. That'd be a Katie Bishop question, who's our
Right.
county clerk. And she is not in the office this week. She's way at a conference, so I would have to check with her. I know anything you do in there, you have to go through and schedule with Katie if you're not going into Miss Turner's room.
Right.
So,
And
So-
again, anything she needed as a result of the Secretary of State's, she had to come through me.
Right.
I had to make the time to go over, unlock the door, go in with her and stay with her while she performed those functions because I was the keeper of the record.
Is there a log in and out on who goes in there? Or did she just come to your office and say, hey, I need to get in?
She just comes to my office and says, hey, I need to get in.
but she gets paperwork from us when we go to drop
Yes.
things off.
Yeah.
So I'm sure Katie gets paperwork as well when people ask for, permission to enter, and they have some kind of system, just like she would get our filing of what we're actually bringing over there.
Mhm.
So it's like she has a record of it and can go
Yes.
back and say, but when you get in, there's not like a clipboard hanging on the door that says sign in or anything.
No.
The records are sealed.
Yes, they are sealed.
They are
Yes, ma'am.
Sealed. Oh, well, Mr. Boatwright has his hand up. We can't recognize you, Mr.
You're recognized.
Okay, thank you.
So Katie's the only one that has a key to the records retention. Okay. So basically, we're shifting from the Superior Court to Katie having access to the records.
But the supervisor election being designated as the holder of the record.
Got that.
Yes.
I understand that.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you for being so forthright.
And this is a fairly common practice, is it
yes,
not?
it is. I'm one of the few clerks in the state because we have an all clerks network. And I said, how many of you still hold election records? Maybe 4.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Maybe 4 or 5. I
Yeah.
can't remember exactly. But it's very common for the clerk to designate someone else as the holder of
Okay.
those records. Any other questions?
I have no further
ma'am.
questions. Any other questions from the board?
Thank you, Ms. Turner.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
The chair will entertain a motion to accept or deny.
I move that we accept the Clerk of Superior Court's designation of the election supervisor as the keeper of the elections records. Records retention custodian, actually, not the keeper. It's more formal than that, yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Yes, sir, you do.
All right. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, thanks.
All right, certification of prospective write-in candidate. Per OCGA 21-2-133, giving notice of intent of write-in candidacy, filling of affidavit, limitations of candidacy, certification of candidates, paragraph go to. The county election superintendent shall certify within 5 days following the deadline of the submission by write-in candidates, county offices of the the notice and documentation required by this code section to be a writing candidate in a general or special election. The names of the persons who have filed notices of intention to be writing candidates within the county election superintendent for county offices for such general or special election. The deadline for the writing candidate to submit the required documentation was September 12th. Election supervisor, you in receipt of all required documentation to certify C. Ben Goff as a writing candidate for the office of Camden County Board of Commissioners, District 2.
Yes, sir, I am.
Do any board members wish to examine the documents provided by C. Ben Goff?
Presumably you've done that already, and the fact that the number of signatures, the requisite number of signatures was provided.
No, no
Oh, no
signature.
signatures?
He
You have to
doesn't-
do a
no.
petition?
Correct. He
Training was
doesn't have to do it.
ineffective. My training was ineffective. No, all he has to do is a notice of writing candidacy and then an affidavit that he actually rented an ad in
Ad
the
in
newspaper. Mhm.
Okay,
And which he's.
And I did see the ad in the newspaper.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. The chair is ready for a motion to certify C. Ben Goff as an eligible writing candidate for the office of Camden County Board of Commissioners, District 2. Anyone like to make a motion?
No, I don't want to do it.
I can make the motion if you'd
All right.
like. All right, I move that we certify C. Ben Goff as an eligible writing candidate for the office of Camden County Board of Commissioners, District 2. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, discussion concerning voter intent guidelines with regards to writing candidates. This is item 3 of new business. When I provided my training last time we were here in July, we talked about writing candidates, and the question was asked, does the person that writes a candidate's name on the ballot, do they have to be exact on how it is spelled? I've come back to realize that when I said that it had to be perfect, that is not correct.
Right.
And there's some opinions from the general attorney on this. This was out of the bottom of OCGA 21-285. Talks about misspelling a candidate's name. It says in those instances where the elector's intent can be clearly and unquestionably ascertained, the elector's vote should be counted even when the elector has not spelled the candidate's name exactly as recorded by the candidate. And then also on judicial decision at the bottom of OCGA 21-294, it talks about persons with spelling problems. And it says persons who do not spell well may take a paper with them into the voting booth, which contains the correct spelling of the candidate's name and from which they may copy that name. Going on further, 21-438, notwithstanding any provisions of this chapter to the contrary in accordance with the rules and regulations, the voter intent is key. I'm
Mhm,
kind of,
mhm,
the voter intent is key.
mhm.
So my concern is we don't provide any direction to the voter when they come into the polling place when it comes to writing candidates. I don't even believe we put their name anywhere in the polling place that there is an actual writing candidate. That is up to the candidate to get that out there. But at some point, we have to let the public know that there's a writing candidate. I don't know if that's our job. I should say that. Is that our job?
I think it would be.
Isn't,
Go ahead.
aren't there ballots that have the write-in candidates? No, the name is never on the ballot?
So when it's a write-in candidate, the voter has to physically type.
Right there.
You know,
Okay.
a keyboard will come up on the BMD screen when you click on the write-in line
Mhm.
for that particular ballot. So You know, if they just put Ben Goff, that's kind of what, you know, we're talking about. And leave out the name he registered as C, Ben Goff. So no, and I want to say though that I just need to verify really if it's only for federal and state candidates, qualified write-ins that we have to post the list at our precinct, or if that's also for a county.
I scrubbed the code
You
and
didn't see that?
the SEB rules, and unless there's some federal rule out there that I don't know about, it does not talk anything about writing candidates and whether you have to notify anyone that there's a writing candidate or not. The only time that you would ever put a candidate's name that I can see anywhere is if they have dropped out of the race and their name is still on the ballot. We have to inform the public.
Yeah,
But as far as a writing candidate,
When we're doing, at the end of the night, I know certainly for the last presidential election, we had lists that showed who was a qualified write-in candidate, because you can spell somebody's name correctly, but if they're not a qualified write-in candidate, it doesn't matter. So somehow the board needs to know that, you know, whoever's, as we're processing the ballots, that needs to be known. So and maybe that's what I'm thinking about, because I remember seeing lists of who were the qualified candidates, for example, for president.
correct. Yep, and we had that long list. And we had to make sure that they were.
but it was not posted at any of the polling places.
No, okay.
Are you saying, should it be?
Well, that's the question I'm asking.
That's what I'm asking.
Do we need to provide that information to the public? Is that our job? I say no at some point, but then I gotta say, am I disenfranchising voters that may want to vote for that person? That's the quandary I'm at, and that's the emails that I've been sending out to all you. Thoughts on?
Where else would they get that information that?
Well,
mean,
Mr.
you
Goff, I'm sure is gonna put out a press release or whatever he's going to do.
I mean, those can't, Mr. Goff in particular, he's already doing.
So
things
even
like
if
that.
we don't do anything as a board, as far as allowing the electors to know that there's a writing candidate, our next goal is to figure out, once the person has voted, do we know what their intent is? And when it comes back to the election staff and it doesn't have C. Ben Goff on there, and the board we set up to certify the results, not certify the results, the
Voter review panel.
voter review panel, what guidelines are we going to give them?
So wait a minute. So you're saying if it says Ben Goff and doesn't say C. Ben Goff?
Right, is that correct?
Oh, voter intent. I mean, and the opinions you quoted, even though they're from 1966, they're still valid because no one has rendered a more recent opinion. So I think if we can, I don't know, if we could in good conscience say, well, we're not going to count your vote for Mr. Goff because his name is C. Ben Goff, and
Right.
you only put Ben Goff. So I think
Right.
we do. Now, we may have done that actually in the past, but in light of this,
Some informal, let's say communications, but discussion led me to believe that there are some people that think it has to be exactly C. Ben Goff for it to count. So that's why I went back and I looked also through the code. And there was a case that came out of Colorado. Now, this was referenced in our election code, even though it's out of Colorado. And basically it says, I'm just trying to paraphrase this. In cases where the voter wrote in Lamb, the lady's name was Peggy Lamb, the case we're talking about, and it was spelled Lamm. Or if it was spelled LAMB, if someone put in their LAMB, that was counted. The court found the requisite intent to cast vote for Peggy Lamb and directed that the votes should be counted. However, write-in votes containing surname Lamb and the first name other than Peggy, such as Dottie, Nancy, Patty, Pelly, Paula, Pat, Pam, were not to be counted. So basically, they're saying as long as someone says Ben Goff, that's good, but if they use any other name but Ben, doesn't count.
Well, I can see that because that's a surname. And if you're putting in Patty or whatever,
Yep.
it could be a sister, brother, whatever.
Correct.
So I think you'd almost go to keep it simple, put the last name in. And if it's spelled anywhere that you can say you're not putting in sheep, you're putting in lamb, then I think that that's what the intent is.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm bringing this up because the voter review panel will need to know what our expectation is of them.
Yeah.
So that we can train them on what we consider the intent of the voter.
I think we should have an expectation that our voting electorate is sufficiently intelligent. Maybe that's probably not the right word, but aware. So you shouldn't come into the voting booth, and I'm sure people do, and it's not a booth anymore, but coming to the polling place and not knowing who you're going to vote for. And people do that, and I understand folks do that all of the time, but so I wouldn't, I don't know that we want to encourage folks to just use the last name.
Oh, no.
But again, we're not, the voter has some responsibility. And I think it's the voter's responsibility to make it clear that this is who they're,
Right.
who they intend to vote for.
I'm gonna-
So,
A caveat to that.
Yeah.
Our educational system, if anybody's reading the news right now, we're way behind, but in my own personal experience, I've got a son that's dyslexic, very intelligent, but he can reverse letters.
mhm.
And so I think we have to be cognizant that although they may be educated and may be intelligent, they may not physically be able to get it from the head to here. I mean, yes, we have digital stuff that'll spell correct. And that's been a wonderful thing for this type of person. But they don't have it in the voting booth.
Right, they want to go for the right
So
answer.
I think we have to be, if you can discern that this is this is what
They meant.
they want
Mhm.
and what they intend, then I think we can't be so judgmental, and that's not the right word, but rigid. I think we have to go with what did the voter intend?
And I agree, as long as the intent is clear. So, in fact, I'm not sure why we're having this protracted discussion. So I would recommend that when we have a voter review panel, if the issue arises, then we have the discussion, because no point in creating a problem where there isn't one. So, yeah.
And keep in mind, our vote review panel has to be made up of specific individuals
Yes.
from different parties
Yes.
Right.
who are going to be, well-versed in doing this, probably have done it before with us. So they're going to understand the voter's intent, and know, and these are, the write-in candidates are going to, if there's any question, they'll come up when we go through and get our results. So it'll be discussed among the group who is the voter review panel.
I guess my full reason for bringing this up is that there's more out there on what the voter intent is, how to determine the voter intent than just the code, the Georgia code. There's case law on it. There's opinions from, attorneys. So when we get to election night, this should be a very quick thing on election night that says, okay, we've already talked about this. We know how to determine the intent of the voter. That's really what I'm driving at. I don't
Yep.
want to spend election night researching,
Yep,
well, should it be C. Ben Goff? Should it be Ben Goff? I don't want to have to do that. I want to
Right.
get this worked out now.
I agree.
Okay? So, yes, I will protract it a little longer.
Do we have does this require a vote?
It did, but I don't think we're going to need a vote on it. I think we're all
I
in
think we're in
consensus of it.
No, we agree.
We
Yeah.
agree.
Intent.
Intent will prevail, and we have some documentation to provide the
Okay.
ballot review panel. All right, election supervisor update?
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of updates on where we're at, what we've been doing. We have poll worker training scheduled for the end of September and early October. We have 70 poll workers that have already signed up for training. I encourage you all to sign up for a training night. I just have some classes that are full already, so I'd have certain days that if you haven't signed up yet, I'd like you to go in that so that you're not in the
Let
full
me
day
interject,
class.
let me interject a little bit. Our strategic plan requires us to attend at least one poll worker training.
You get with me? So I get.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so we have 70 already signed up. That's returning poll workers as well as a batch of new poll workers that'll be with us. Today, when I opened my email, I had 6 new poll worker applications. So they are still coming in. I'm not going to say, we're not struggling for poll workers. We have people that are actively wanting to work with us, and that have, obviously 70 have signed up for training. But we have been losing poll workers as well that it's not for them anymore.
How many are you gonna need?
I think we figured it was close to 70.
So you're close.
Yeah, close
Okay.
to 70 that we would need. So not everyone is signed up yet for poll worker training. So these numbers will grow, and I'm pushing them towards 2 other classes that aren't quite as full.
Are you still advertising for?
Yeah, our poll workers, it's on our website, and we
Putting it in
mentioned I'm
paper or
going to,
anything?
ma'am,
Putting it in paper or anything?
I'm not advertising in the paper for it, no. But we do go to have a job fair that's coming up
Okay.
that I'm doing at the College of Coastal Georgia, as well as we'll be at the high school next week too, so. I just wanted you to give you an update on how many and encourage you to sign up.
Shannon, why not the paper?
I think
I'm just asking.
their target audience, well, I don't know about their target audience, but I think between social media and what we put out in press releases ourselves, the newspaper's not cheap. And I think we're finding, I had 6 this morning. I haven't put anything
Okay.
in the paper. So I feel like we're getting, if I thought that we needed more and more people, then maybe we'd go to the paper, but I think we're okay right now without advertising there.
Thank you.
The new updated strategic plan is on the website under our page, so if you all want to check that out. I have current voter numbers just to share with you as of the 31st of September. Active voters, we had 34,820 active voters in Camden County. Inactive voters are just under 7,000 people. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Total voters are at 41,780. So the state is in the middle, well, almost at the end of NCOA, notice of change of address. So we have a lot of cards that we're inputting information into the system right now about returned addresses, moved out of state. So I think you see that inactive voter number a little higher and the active voters a little bit lower. As we get new people in, we lose people, obviously, and we are still in kind of like at the end of that NCOA notice, so. Let's see. We have received already over 500 applications for absentee ballots. We couldn't start taking them until September 21st, August 22nd. We have over 500 now. I'm pretty certain we'll get another 250 or 500 before the deadline, which is October 11th. So we expect to be mailing out a lot of absentee ballots. Let's see. Oh, our new location in Waverly, we've gotten paperwork back from Calvary Christian Center. They're ready to go and be our newest Waverly site. Advertisements have been made in the newspaper because that is
Saw that.
mandated by law. We have a sign, a large sign that's also mandated going up in front of the Waverly Fire Station to direct people to the new Calvary Christian Center site. And we also have our precinct cards for those in the Waverly district that are in the process of being mailed out. So that's good news. And if you haven't been, well, let me know and we'll take you by because it'll be a nice setup for that area. All right, board members in seats 2, 4, and 5. If you saw that there was I don't know if it was a public notice or a press release, went out requesting applicants for those seats. For seats 2, 4, and 5, those terms end December 31st. So if you'd like to reapply, you complete another application that's online on the website. And we have new commissioners coming into seats 2 and 4. So those are just a couple things to think about. We haven't met with them yet, and obviously the election hasn't happened for seat 2 yet, so we have to wait a little bit on that. But it is out there, applications are coming in, and they're being sent to the clerk, okay?
It says applications will be accepted until filled. So are we, what does that mean?
So what we've done in the past is the applications come out, they'll put probably another notice out saying when the deadline,
Okay.
give a specific deadline. But the commissioners of those districts generally interview
Right.
the candidates that have, those individuals that have applied. So we'll give you more, we wanted to get it out early enough.
Okay.
Because we kind of get in that flux where we've got new commissioners coming on board, but they don't come on until January 1st. And your term ends December 31st, but I believe our bylaws say you stay on as an active board member until.
Yeah, HB 1023 directs it, you'll stay on until your replacement is designated.
Yeah.
Do you think it might be nice to reach out to the new commissioners and invite them to one of our meetings so they can see what the election board is like since we don't have an overlap?
I believe that both of them, all of them have been here to our
Yeah.
meetings.
Have they?
Yes,
Yep.
except for Mr. Goff. No, Mr. Goff was at one of our meetings also.
They've all attended. They know when the meetings are,
Okay.
so.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's, I think it's prudent for those sitting in those seats to have some discussion with the
Yeah.
upcoming commissioners, so. It's my opinion, though.
Yeah, I don't foresee the outgoing commissioners designating the replacement. I don't see that happening.
So that was just a reminder. And make sure you all knew that was going on. Dennis and I, who's sitting over here today, Dennis and I are going to visit the high school next week for National Voter Registration Day. We will try to get some of those younger students registered, and those students that'll be 18 by November 8th. So we do have a few hours that we will be out there next week. LNA begins the day after National Voter Registration Day at the high school, or it's National Voter Registration Day. It's the 20th. That's Tuesday. On the 21st, LNA begins. for machines going out for advanced voting and for the election on November the 8th. So that'll take place at the normal warehouse location. The ad was in the paper today for that, and signs are posted for logic and accuracy to begin. We have ballots as of yesterday afternoon. There's 41 different ballots for Camden. So that's not actually too bad. So I was happy with that. And there are 18-inch long ballots. They will start going out to the absentee, those that have requested absentee ballots in mid-October, right? October 12th, 11th. So
October 10th.
UOCAVAs go out next week. So those are the uniformed and overseas military individuals and those that have UOCAVA status. So those go out starting on the 19th or the 20th. The last day to register to be able to vote in the November 8th election is October 11th.
You're stealing my thunder here.
So you're going to do all that?
Yeah.
Oh, and you'll see that on your agenda as well. I think that's all I have. Do you all have any questions for me?
No questions. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, on to Board of Election Registration Training. Dr. Bradford, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm prepared to do this. However, we're 2 board members short, and we've already been in here an hour.
Uh-huh.
So we've probably got people waning interest. Do we have a presentation scheduled for October?
No, no one has done anything for October, and that's why.
Because I'm happy. Probably you want, if you all want,
Well,
because that's a lot. It's a lot of information.
okay. The only thing is October, our next board meeting will be during advanced voting.
Well, I'll run through it in 5 minutes.
Excellent.
All right.
I would rather wait till they come.
Oh,
We have a full board. I think it's our training. We only have 2/3 the board here.
Well, you'll provide the training via email to the other board members. It's really up to you. I have no.
5 minutes. I'll do it in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So, voter registration is really, it's a huge piece of what we're all about. And as you can see, it covers, you anticipated, because I didn't say next slide. I'll have to do some training. Back it up. There's 26 sections of the code. So there is a lot of information. It was not my intent to explain. I really just want to highlight, and it's up to the board to go back and read the information. So yes, please, next slide. And the Air Force taught me that you should tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So this is what I'm going to tell you. This is way too busy. Under normal circumstances, there's way too much stuff on that slide. But those are the things. And then I took some things out. But I was looking from the perspective of things that are important to the board, because this is training for the board. So next slide, please, and I'll talk to you about how I've got this, my type. So if the type looks like this, then it is verbatim from the code. I'm not going to read it to you. But this one talks about county registrars and how we were appointed and terms of service. And I remember we had a meeting one time and one lady said, "So how did y'all get to be on the board?" So this is what happens. But the real reason I wanted this one here was the 2021 amendment effective March 25th, 2021, SB 201. No Board of Registrars shall take or accept any funding, grants, or gifts from any source other than the governing authority of the county, the state of Georgia, or the federal government. So boards are not allowed to accept funds from anybody else. The state makes that ultimate decision. Next slide, please. Qualification of registrars and deputy registrars. So if it's in this italicized type, then that's my paraphrasing. So the first one says, if a board member is qualified for nomination or for nomination for office, but either at a primary or an election, or if you qualify, then you have to get off the board. The second one, interestingly, says, however, but a board member is not required to vacate the board because of your involvement in a political party. And we had that discussion when we
We did.
first started, and we didn't have benefit. We didn't know what we didn't know. C, while conducting the duties of the office, you can't engage in any political activity on behalf of a candidate, a party,
Right.
or body, or even a political question. And so I put that one, I wanted to highlight that one because when we are doing our review on election night, we just need to be, that's one of the clear instances where we are doing the duties of the board. So we just need to make sure that we're not doing anything that makes it look like we're being partisan. The last paragraph, F, the registrar shall conduct their duties in public, and all hearings on the qualifications of the elector shall be conducted in public. That's verbatim. And we've talked about qualifications of electors, and again, the information is there for you to read it. The next one, please. The office, that's verbatim. The office has to be open during regular business hours. So we don't, you shouldn't call the elections office at 3:00 in the afternoon and it's closed because everybody's gone fishing. You're not allowed to do that. And then paragraph F says the boards cannot adopt rules or procedures that are inconsistent with any rules and regulations that have been adopted by the state election board. So we can't just do our own thing. Next slide, please. This one was really interesting. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it says that every principal, assistant principal of every public or private high school, college, technical institution can be, or they can designate someone to be a deputy registrar in the county where the school is located. And as such, they can receive voter registration applications. And the Board of Elections is responsible for providing annual training to these folks. Now, if that happens, so I don't even know who the principal of the high school is. It's not, I want to say
Dr. Tucker,
Is it Tucker?
Dr. Tucker,
Okay.
yeah.
So Dr. Tucker could be a deputy registrar.
Superintendent, Dr. Loden. Dr. Loden.
Okay. Well,
Tucker
he
is the
could be
superintendent.
a deputy registrar, and if so, then we would have to train him. But I thought that was interesting. It's like, you don't really have a choice if we opted to do that. Okay, next slide, please. They don't.
I thought they had to be deputy register.
Yeah, but,
Automatically.
okay, but we've been on the board for 3 years. We haven't trained anybody.
I know.
So again, in terms of expanding our reach with regard to getting people to vote, that was one of the I thought that one was pretty interesting, as well as this next one, which talks about which offices shall be designated voter registration agency. So every office in the state of Georgia which provides any kind of public assistance, state-funded programs, or as a recruitment office of the armed forces shall be designated voter registration agencies. And the other one, the next one says, in addition to those, that's a shall. And then the Secretary of State also has the authority to designate other offices. I was just in Alaska, and the only time I saw a vote here was a public library. And it dawned on me that I don't think we use our public library as a place to register people to vote?
They have cards there.
They do
Yeah.
have cards?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and they drop them off there. DFAX, the driver's license office.
Okay,
Yep.
and that D talks to that. So if they are designated voter registration agencies, then they have to distribute applications, they have to assist the applicants, and they have to accept them and submit them to the Secretary of State. Okay, next slide. Persons to register. It is the duty of the Board of Registrars to determine the eligibility of each person applying to register to vote. Obviously, there are 5 people on the board. We don't do this, that we delegate that to the election superintendent and her staff. But that is one of our responsibilities. If a person is found ineligible to register to vote, they have to be notified in writing. And every person who's found eligible to vote shall receive a voter registration card. Next slide, please. Registration deadlines, you've got to register to vote by the 5th Monday or the next business day if that Monday is a legal holiday, prior to the date of a general primary, general election, or a presidential preference primary. And then I skipped down to then paragraph E. The County Board of Registrars delivers a copy of the list of electors to the municipality for whichever election is being held, but you can't do it before the 5th Monday prior to the election, which makes sense because people have until the 5th Monday to submit an application to register. And then you have to do so within 21 days before the election. And then paragraph F is verbatim. The official list of electors eligible to vote shall be prepared and completed at least 5 calendar days prior to the primary or the election in which the list is to be used. Next, yes, sure.
So if it's a federal election, the rules are 30 days prior to the election, you can register to vote. So that's why we had to have 2 separate ballots during the runoff.
Okay.
Okay, so there are different rules between state and federal as far as registration is concerned, right?
Periods of retention of registration cards, and that's why this earlier discussion was interesting. So voter registration cards, for electors who are on the list of electors or on the list of inactive electors, must be retained on file for as long as the elector is on the list or for 2 years following removal from the list. If the person has been rejected, then their material has to be retained for 2 years. That's people who applied to register to vote, and for whatever reason they weren't accepted. And then paragraph C, records containing list maintenance activities under those in sections 21, 233 and 234 shall be maintained for 2 years, and they are available for public inspection and copying, except the public does not have access to who was rejected as an applicant, nor does the public have access to which agency through which a particular elector was registered. Next slide. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that was it. So read the code book. Yeah.
Nice,
Howdy.
Janet.
All right, any questions on the training?
And all board members have a copy in their, in their binders.
Okay, can you email that to us? I dig.
I can get it out to everyone.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to item J, important upcoming dates. Earliest date for registrar to mail a UOCAVA absentee ballot and ranked choice ballot and transmit an electronic ballot delivery of the same for the November general election is Tuesday, September 20th. Logic and accuracy test begins Wednesday, September 21st. Columbus Day is a holiday. That says October 10th. Earliest day for registrants to mail a regular absentee ballot non-Unicava for the November election is Monday, October 10th, but we'll actually mail those out on the 11th because the 10th is a holiday. Voter registration deadline for the November general election, special election is Tuesday, October the 11th. Advance in-person voting for general election starts Monday, October 17th through Friday, November 4th, with Saturday voting on October 22nd and October 29th. Our next meeting is Thursday, October 20th. The November general election, as we know, is November 8th, and Veterans Day is on Friday, November the 11th. Moving on to item K. Our November meeting was shifted to November 14th at 5 p.m. The Secretary of State came back and said we have until the 15th to certify the election, but upon talking to Shannon, I believe that we can have the 14th and certify the election on November 14th. Okay, so that will remain November 14th at 5 p.m. Moving on to additional public comments, please state your name. And we're limiting public comments to 3 minutes.
Mary Beckman, District 3. As you discussed the upcoming selection of the District 2, 4, and 5 member of the board by the Board of County Commissioners, I was a bit disturbed to hear you talking about it as if it was the board, the commissioner, member of the Board of Commissioners who made the selection and not the board as a whole. I remind you that your bylaws and the House bill on which your bylaws was based says that it's the governing body that decides how the Board of Elections and Registration would be selected. So it's not the board, the commissioner for the district who selects it. It's the Board of Commissioners as a whole. And your bylaws also say that if the selection needs to be made by the end of December, and if the selection is not made by the end of December, the selection goes into the hands of the probate judge. That did not happen the last time you had a new district commissioner come in. In other words, the county commissioners violated the law the last time. And I would urge them to not do so again.
Anyone else? Any other public comments?
Kelvin Blue, 4515 Georgia Highway 40, St. Mary's. As far as this write-in candidate go, from early 2000s, basically what has been stated today means that the process for accepting write-in candidates here in Camden County has been flawed up until this conversation. As it was spoken and now as it has been read, the rules are if it can be clear what the voters' intentions were, then you go with it. I strongly recommend that there be a guidelines for that acceptance, if you will. Whether we say the last name has to be spelled correct or the first and last, I don't know, something where it will be consistent. So when the voter review is considering there's no misunderstandings. What I may perceive as intent may be very different from the next person. So if we're going to address it, which is within the rules, if we're going to address it, make it common, as long as it's spelled this way, as long as the letters can be legible. And don't get me wrong, I get it. There's some people who don't write that well. It is up to the candidate to ensure that the voting population understands what must be done. I've ran as a write-in candidate before. The rules are very clear. They don't get the name right, they don't get the vote. So if we're gonna go by intentions, there needs to be some guidelines that outlines, hey, voter review panel, this is what we're looking for. If it looks anything like this, we can determine that the intent is clear. Otherwise, there may be some disputes. Got to get that with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, seeing no other additional public comments. If there is no objection, this meeting will now adjourn. Since there is no objection, this meeting is adjourned.